London smells wet. Smoke hanging low over the city like something tired. Coal smoke, horse manure, river rot drifting from the River Thames. Rain trapped in narrow streets where mud swallows boots and trash gathers in corners no one bothers cleaning. Nothing about this city feels polished. It feels crowded, cold, and suspicious. And above it all sits a kingdom still healing, or not healing at all. Because England in the early 17th century lives with memory like an open wound. Religion divides everything. Families, politics, friendship, life. Not long ago, Catholic queens ruled and Protestants burned. Then Protestant rulers return and Catholics find themselves watched, fined, distrusted, and pushed quietly to the edges of public life. Now a new king wears the crown, King James I. For some English Catholics, hope arrives with him. James is the son of Mary and Queen of Scots. Maybe some whisper things change now. Maybe restrictions ease. Maybe tolerance finally comes. Maybe England stops punishing faith. But instead, hope sours. Heavy fines remain and pressure continues.
I walk through silence, thick and cold, where shadows drift and time grows old. No voice to call, no path to take, just fog and fear with every ache. Souls in the fog.
In taverns, rented rooms, and quiet corners of London, frustration hardens into something dangerous. Among the enraged sits a man named Robert Catesby. Charismatic and well-connected. The kind of man people lean toward when he speaks. Not reckless exactly, but something more dangerous. He's convincing. Imagine him seated in dim candlelight while rain taps softly against the shutters, tankards resting untouched. The room smells of damp wool, smoke, and stale ale. He speaks carefully. England, he believes, will not change peacefully. Petitions fail, patience fail, and our hope fails. And eventually, someone asks the forbidden question conspiracies always reach. Well, then what? Silence. The kind that stretches. Then Catesby says something impossible. Not protest. Not persuasion. Not assassination in some dark alley. Something much bigger. Remove the government itself. The king, the lords, the commons, all in one single strike. Imagine hearing this for the first time. You'd probably laugh, or wonder whether too much drink finally had caught up to him. Because what he proposes sounds absurd. To destroy Parliament? While king and political leadership gather together? A single violent act powerful enough to rip England apart and rebuild it in the chaos after. This is madness. Unless it works. Slowly, men begin listening. James Wintower, John Wright, Thomas Percy, these are trusted faces. Catholics carrying resentment heavy enough to make dangerous things sound reasonable. Oaths are taken, hands are shaken, promises are made beneath flickering candlelight. Outside, London continues unaware, while inside a handful of men begin discussing the destruction of a kingdom. Then Robert Catesby brings in someone else. A soldier. A man who understands war, a veteran hardened by fighting in Europe. His name? Guy Fawkes. At first, he looks almost forgettable, broad-shouldered, controlled, reserved. The sort of man who speaks little, but notices much. A useful man, because conspiracies eventually stop being dreams. Sooner or later, someone has to build them. And beneath London, in shadows and damp stone, a plan begins taking shape. At first, this plan feels impossible, almost laughable, really. England is not some forgotten kingdom asleep at the edge of the world. This is royal government, guards, officials, servants everywhere. Eyes everywhere. You don't just kill a king. You certainly do not destroy Parliament. And yet, the more conspirators stare at the problem, the more it begins shrinking into pieces. Not can it be done, but how? Once impossible things become logistics, conspiracies get dangerous. London breathes around them. Rainwater slides down timbered buildings. Bells toll through grey mornings. Markets crowd with the shouting merchants, the fishmongers, mud, smoke, and arguments. A constant stink of too many people packed too tightly together. And somewhere inside rented rooms, whispered meetings continue. Maps, timing, entrances, schedules. Who stands where? Who can be trusted? Who absolutely cannot? At one point, the plan turns toward tunnels. Men cramped underground in choking darkness, lantern light flickering against damp earth, while hands blister digging beneath the city itself. Sweat mixing with clay, the sound of scraping metal swallowed by thick silence, or maybe rats, or dripping water. The kind of labor that makes grand political dreams suddenly feel exhausting and painfully real. But London inconveniently keeps changing around them. Construction shifts. Access changes. And then an opportunity appears. Better than tunnels. Much better. A cellar. A vaulted undercroft beneath the Palace of Westminster itself. Close enough to power to feel unreal. Imagine the first time they step inside. Cold, damp air. Smell of earth and old timber. Dust hanging motionless in the dim light. Above them, though impossible to see, the machinery of government. The lords, the commons, the king himself. Power stacked overhead, and beneath it, emptiness with potential. Thomas Percy secured access, legitimately enough not to attract suspicion, because sometimes conspiracies work best when hidden inside ordinary paperwork. Rental agreements, storage, routine movement, nothing dramatic. Just bureaucracy, quietly opening doors history later wishes would remain closed. Then comes the gunpowder, barrel after barrel, quietly moved, hidden beneath fuel and firewood. 36 barrels eventually crowd the undercroft, enough explosive force to tear stone apart, enough to kill everyone gathered overhead, enough to change England forever. Picture the room now, lantern light flickering across the stacked barrels, cold moisture clinging to stone, the smell of sulfur and damp wood. Guy Fawkes kneeling beside supplies, checking fuses with a soldier's patience. No wild-eyed fanatic screaming about destiny. He understands exactly what explosives do, exactly what bodies look like afterward, exactly what will happen overhead when the moment comes. Outside the undercroft, life continues. Politicians complain and London argues with itself, as always, completely unaware that beneath Parliament sits enough gunpowder to turn government into smoke. And for a while, the conspiracy holds. No betrayals, no discovery. Just waiting. The hardest part. Because conspiracies love momentum, but waiting creates nerves and doubt. And eventually, fear begins whispering again. The gunpowder sits waiting beneath Parliament, silent in darkness while days crawl forward toward November. Above ground, London carries on. Rain slicks the streets, horses drag carts through mud thick enough to swallow wheels. Church bells ring across damp morning air. Men complain about taxes, trade, weather. And as always, religion. Nobody notices history crouching underground. But inside the conspiracy, nerves were beginning to fray. And how could they not? 36 barrels of powder lie beneath the center of government. The king, the lords, and the commons. Bishops and judges. All of them eventually packed together above a room that smells of sulfur, damp stone, and waiting violence. And afterward, well, that part matters too, because conspiracies do not end at destruction. They require futures. Robert Catesby thinks beyond the blast. England thrown into chaos. Government shattered. Panic spreading faster than smoke. In the confusion, a Catholic restoration might become possible. A young royal child, Princess Elizabeth, could be seized and shaped into a political figurehead. New power built from catastrophe, at least that's the hope. But hope grows shaky the longer people sit with consequences. Imagine late-night meetings now, candles burning shorter, voices quieter, someone staring too long into ale they are not drinking. And someone finally asks the question nobody wants to. What about the Catholics in Parliament? Because here's the uncomfortable truth. The explosion will not care who worships or how. People sympathetic to Catholic causes die, and suddenly conviction collides with reality. Then, a letter, anonymous, brief but enough to change everything. Late October, a Catholic nobleman named William Parker, Lord Monteagle, receives warning. Imagine the moment, a servant arriving with folded paper, fire burning nearby, the smell of smoke, wet wool, wax, and Monteagle reads slowly, and then he reads it again, because the words land strangely. He's advised carefully, but vaguely, to avoid attending Parliament. Stay away. Something terrible approaches. No explanation, no signature, just a warning. You can almost feel the silence afterward. Men in 17th century England understand implication. Nobody sends mysterious warnings for ordinary danger. And now comes the terrible human question sitting inside every conspiracy. Who talked? Did someone panic? Grow guilty? Try saving a friend? Try saving themselves? Even now, historians still argue over the letter's origins. Francis Tresham often sits near suspicion. Betrayal inside conspiracies rarely arrives dramatically, and sometimes it slips quietly into someone's hands, folded into paper. Monteagle, he does something dangerous. He shows authorities. Soon the warning moves upward toward men who spend careers smelling political danger, toward royal officials and toward King James himself. England swims in plots and paranoia already, but the wording lingers. A terrible blow. Parliament. Hidden danger. And slowly and quietly, eyes turn toward Westminster, toward the cellars, toward shadows beneath the stone. Meanwhile, Guy Fawkes waits. Down in cold darkness, beneath Parliament, lantern light flickers weakly. Against rough walls, the barrels sit silent. Firewood stacked carefully above them. The fuse plan ready. Outside, November inches closer. The kingdom sleeps above catastrophe. And somewhere else in London, men begin deciding to search. And the search begins. Men with lanterns glancing into spaces because someone tells them to glance into spaces. Nothing more. Westminster groans quietly in cold night air. Drafts slip through stone corridors. Servants move half asleep. Guards complain softly about weather, while smoke from torches crawls against ceilings blackened by years of soot. Below, the Undercroft waits, and Guy Fawkes is waiting too. Though tonight he is not Guy Fawkes. Tonight he is John Johnson, a servant, a caretaker, a forgettable man standing beside stacked firewood in a damp cellar beneath Parliament. Cold stones, sweating moisture, lantern light trembling weakly, the smell of sulphur hidden beneath damp timber and stale underground air. Fawkes stands ready, calm enough to be convincing, probably calmer than he felt. And above his head rests government, below his feet, history. Then footsteps, followed by voices. A door opens, and an inspection arrives. Lantern light cuts through the darkness, and questions come casually. Who are you? What's this? Wild wood. Nothing dramatic. No accusations shouted, and Fawkes answers smoothly. Thomas Percy, he explains. Storage, fuel. Just routine things. The officials glance around. Wood, barrels hidden beneath, and darkness doing most of the work. Nothing immediately wrong. Conspiracies survive because ordinary explanations are powerful. Men see what they expect to see. Storage beneath Parliament? Reasonable. A servant watching supplies? Reasonable. A cellar full of wood in late autumn? Also reasonable. The inspectors leave. Imagine his relief, the kind that floods through your chest and makes your knees feel weak afterwards. For one impossible moment, the conspiracy survives. One more day, one more night, one more step from success. And maybe somewhere in London, Catesby hears the news and exhales slowly, but suspicion is a stubborn thing, especially near kings. The warning letter nags at minds upstairs. King James turns the words over and over again. A terrible blow. Parliament. Hidden danger. Something about it feels wrong. too strange, too deliberate. He orders his men to search again, properly this time. So sometime near midnight, the sound of boots return. And cold air follows armed men carrying lanterns down into stone shadows. Sir Thomas Knivet leads the search. No sleepy glance this time. They move carefully and methodically. Lantern light flickers across the walls, wood stacked strangely high. Too much wood. Enough to make someone pause. Knivet narrows his eyes. Move it. The sound echoes harder underground now. Wood dragged aside. Dust is disturbed. Scrape against stone. And then barrels. 1, 2, 5, 10, and then more. The realization spreads slowly at first, the way horror often does. Not confusion, but recognition. Gunpowder. A catastrophic amount of it. Enough to erase Parliament, enough to kill a king, enough to shake England apart. And nearby stands Fawkes, a man waiting in darkness beside enough explosive force to rewrite history. For one long second, the conspiracy hangs between worlds. Success or failure. Then, hands grab him, questions explode, and steel flashes in lantern light. Somewhere above ground, sleeping London absolutely has no idea how close it comes to waking inside a catastrophe. Now, at first, Guy Fawkes says almost nothing. Imagine being hauled upward from the cold undercroft in torchlight and noise. Bootsteps hammer against the wood and stone, the smell of smoke, wet wool, and sweat. In the middle of it, this one man. Too calm for his situation. He gives his name. John Johnson. Claims service to Thomas Percy, little else. No trembling confession or desperate bargain, just a soldier's stillness. And that frightens people more. Because standing beside 36 barrels of gunpowder with matches in your pocket is one thing. Standing beside them and remaining composed after capture, that feels a little different. That's a lot more committed. And word moves quickly. A plot. A real one. Not a rumor. Not whispered paranoia. Someone nearly destroyed Parliament. Someone nearly killed a king. Imagine Westminster waking around the news. Doors thrown open. Servants rushing around. Officials half-dressed and raging. Lanterns swinging wildly through the dark corridors while exhausted men suddenly discover they are no longer tired. And above it all, fear. Because one question lands hard and immediately. If this man waits below Parliament, who else is involved? Meanwhile, somewhere else in England, Robert Catesby and the others begin hearing fragments, a failed signal, rumors arriving too quickly, arrest and discovery, Fawkes is in custody. And for a moment, disbelief probably wins. No, this has got to be impossible, he tells himself. But no, the Undercroft survives the inspections. The plans survive delays. How does something this large suddenly collapse? But then reality sets in. The plot has been exposed, and England no longer sleeps above danger. England is hunting the conspirators. Feelings settling into that room, faces pale in firelight, the men staring at each other, one another in silence. Who talks first? Who runs? Who still believes something can be salvaged? Because conspiracies feel inevitable while hidden, but exposure makes them fragile and messy. Some flee. Horses push hard through bitter air, roads slick with rain and mud, hooves striking frozen earth while dawn creeps slowly across the countryside. And Catesby rides. Thomas Percy, John and Christopher Wright, and Thomas Wintower, men who days earlier stand inches from remaking a kingdom, now reduced to fugitives, measuring distance and luck. But hope refuses to die quietly. Perhaps rebellion can still spark. Perhaps Catholic supporters rise. They gather weapons, move their houses sympathetic to the cause. Try desperately to build momentum faster than royal authority. But momentum, it feels like desperation now. It feels forced. And back in London, the questioning hardens, and Fawkes remains difficult and stubborn, even admirable in a rather grim kind of way. At one point, he reportedly says he intends to blow the Scots king back into Scotland. Dark humor surviving catastrophe, but King James wants names. And England possesses tools for extracting them. Terrible tools. In cold stone chambers, the smell of damp iron, a chair, and chains. At first, restraint. Then permission. Royal permission. torture. Enough to make silence expensive. And somewhere between pain, exhaustion, and the slow breaking of certainty, the names begin to come. Catesby, Percy, the Wind Towers, and others. The conspiracy that feels monumental underground begins unraveling, thread by thread. Meanwhile, the fugitives keep riding toward one final desperate stand. The rain follows them, cold and miserable, rain that turns roads ugly and makes horses slower. The kind that settles into clothes and never really leaves. By now, exhaustion rides beside every man. Robert Catesby pushes forward anyway. So does Percy, the Wright brothers, Windtower, Ambrose Rockwood, and some others, still clinging to momentum, because momentum is all they have left. Because rebellion, the thing that they briefly imagined might rise behind the explosion, never truly arrives. Villages hesitate and their support shrinks. Doors open more cautiously than hoped, and people who might sympathize with Catholic suffering suddenly become far less enthusiastic when sympathy starts sounding like treason against the king. That is another cruel truth conspiracies learn. People love possibility, but consequences are much harder. The conspirators eventually gather at Holbeck House, a country house far from London, though panic somehow still finds them. Imagine the mood. Wet cloaks, steaming night firelight, muddy boots, faces pale with sleeplessness, hands shaking just from cold, hunger, and nerves. No one says it yet, but everyone feels it. This is going badly. But hope flickers. Weapons are cleaned, powder checked, plans muttered half-heartedly, maybe supporters arrive, maybe royal forces hesitate. Maybe one last turn of luck changes everything. Then, luck betrays them again. Gunpowder laid out to dry near a fire suddenly ignites into a burst of flame, a flash, the heat, chaos, and the men shouting, smoke swallowing rooms, burned hands, burned faces, shock landing hard and immediate. Imagine standing there, eyes watering, the smell of scorched powder and burnt cloth filling lungs, somebody swearing, somebody else clutching ruined skin. The sort of accident that feels almost cruelly symbolic. Even the powder turns against them. And outside, the royal authorities are closing in. Government is finally catching up, and the conspirators know before anyone says it. No speeches are needed, no dramatic realization, just a shared understanding spreading quietly through tired bodies. This ends here. Dawn creeps gray across the countryside at Holbeck House. The remaining men prepare. Some pray, some sit silently with thoughts that they'd rather not share. Catesby moves among them, still proud and still unwilling to surrender. Mud drying on his boots, smoke still lingering faintly in the air. A man who begins this story whispering revolution in candlelit rooms, now standing in a farmhouse preparing to die for it. Outside, armed men approach. Then the violence begins. Gunfire cracks through the cold morning air, wood splinters and smoke erupts. Men shout over confusion. This is no elegant last stand. No poetry, just panic, courage, and terror. Colliding at terrible speed. Catesby falls, and he's been shot. Thomas Percy beside him, with the Wright brothers as well, all dead. The conspiracy finally collapsing not beneath Parliament, but in mud and gun smoke, far from London. When royal men enter afterward, they reportedly find Catesby's body near an image of the Virgin Mary. The symbolism almost feels written by someone too dramatic to be real. And just like that, the plot is over. Almost. Because England still wants spectacle. Back in London, other survivors face trial. The atmosphere feels theatrical now. Fear sharpened into performance. The king lives and Parliament survives. The nation wants punishment large enough to match the terror, and that punishment comes. Guy Fawkes, physically broken but still recognizable in stubbornness, stands among the accused. The famous signature left after interrogation trembles weakly across paper, barely resembling the hand of the man arrested beneath Westminster. Sentences are handed down. Execution. Severe enough to warn generations. Crowds gather in the cold air. Murmuring voices hush, and the kingdom makes an example. Fawkes reaches the scaffold last. And even here, history twists just a little odd. Weak, damaged, and exhausted, he leaps from the ladder, breaking his own neck before the full sentence can unfold. A final escape of sorts, dark and fitting. And England remembers. With bonfires, bells, and celebrations, children eventually learning rhymes about powder and treason. Some conspiracies vanish quietly. Others become national memory. The Gunpowder Plot failed spectacularly, but for one terrible stretch of time, England came closer than most people realized to waking up leaderless, terrified, and burning. And then something changes in the history of conspiracy. The target stops being a king in a room, and in the 19th and 20th centuries, conspiracy begins to move inside the institutions themselves. Washington hums differently than London. There's no coal smoke, no mud-swallowing boots outside Parliament, no barrels hidden beneath stone. Here the air tastes like summer heat rising off concrete, cigarette smoke curling through office ceilings, coffee gone stale in paper cups, and ambition dressed in cheap, dark suits. Power wears a suit and tie now, but it still whispers. And by the early 1970s, America feels uneasy. The war in Vietnam drags on. Protesters fill streets across America, and by now new technology has taken part in common life and conspiracies. Televisions glow, late night into the night, carrying arguments directly into living rooms. The country feels divided and suspicious of something. Into that atmosphere walks a president who trusts almost no one. The scandal begins, strangely enough, not with a president, but with a building. The Watergate complex. Modern, polished glass and concrete, standing expensive and confident against Washington's heat. Inside sits the headquarters of the Democratic National Committee. Ordinary offices, phones, desks, filing cabinets, secretaries arriving with coffee and routine exhaustion. Nothing about it feels historic, and that is the unsettling thing here, is conspiracies rarely announce themselves. They hide inside boring spaces and boring places. Late at night, the building changes though. Hallways empty, air conditioning hums softly through quiet corridors. Elevator doors close with mechanical sighs, and security guards walk familiar routes, half from habit, half from boredom. And somewhere in the darkness, men are moving. Not spies in slick suits, not master criminals, just men trying very hard not to be noticed. Quiet shoes against carpet, the kind of nervous energy that comes from doing something illegal while convincing yourself that it's necessary. Their mission sounds absurdly small for something history would remember forever. Break in and plant bugs. Gather intelligence and information. Conspiracy changes here. There's no king to stab. There's no emperor to poison. Now power begins hiding inside information, inside phones, inside documents, inside secrets stolen quietly at 2 a.m. And somewhere far above this nervous little operation sits an administration, increasingly obsessed with its enemies, whether they're real or imagined. Men around President Richard Nixon speak in language thick with paranoia, leaks and loyalty, control, who can be trusted and who can't. Conversations drift towards covert operations the way hurricanes drift toward coastlines. At first, the break-in almost works. Almost. Conspiracies have a weakness older than Egypt. Human beings make mistakes. Tape appears over a door latch. Just a small thing, something forgettable, except someone noticed. Security guard Frank Wills. Imagine him making rounds late at night. Fluorescent lights overhead, silence stretching through empty halls, and then something catches his eye. A piece of tape. No reason for it to be there, so he removes it, and he keeps walking. He returns later on in his nightly rounds of the building, and there's the tape again. Fresh tape. Same spot. Well, now he's getting curious. Sometimes history changes, not when kings move armies, but when one tired man notices something that feels off and decides not to ignore it. So upstairs, the burglars keep working, completely unaware that downstairs someone is already calling police. Now, the police arrive quietly. No sirens tearing through the night, no dramatic floodlights. Just quiet. Plainclothes officers move toward the building, dressed casually enough to disappear into the darkness. Washington cops trying not to look like Washington cops. The city outside, it barely notices. Cars drive over the wet pavement, neon signs glow against humid air. Somewhere, a bar empties into laughter that's already forgetting itself. But inside the Watergate, 5 men keep working. James McCord, Bernard Baker, Virgilio Gonzalez, Eugenio Martinez, and Frank Sturgis. Not master spies, just men sweating in office darkness while carrying cameras, bugging equipment, lockpicks, rolls of tape, cash, and notebooks. Imagine the mood upstairs. A low hum of fluorescent lighting, the air conditioning pushing stale, cool air through empty offices, the smell of paper, carpet cleaner, and machine heat. Someone whispering, someone glancing too often towards the hallway, someone silently convincing himself that they're almost done. And then suddenly, there's movement. Voices where silence should be. The elevator opens, footsteps, and a pause. You can almost feel the moment tightening. Then, the police move in. The burglars are caught almost embarrassingly easily. No escape through ventilation shafts. No thrilling chase across rooftops. Just men standing inside an office building looking suddenly very ordinary under the bright lights. Much like deer in the headlights. And at first, it almost feels small. A burglary. Weird, sure. Political, maybe. But Washington survives weird. Washington runs on weird. Then investigators start opening pockets. Addresses, phone numbers, they find cash and connections. And James McCord especially becomes a problem. Because McCord, he's not random. He has ties to the president's re-election effort and ties to intelligence circles as well. To men close enough to power, that coincidence starts to feel uncomfortable. Imagine reporters leaning over desks in smoky newsrooms. Their coffee's gone cold, the phone's ringing, typewriters hammering away. And then there's somebody saying, wait, who exactly are these guys? And somewhere inside the White House, nothing but tension. Quiet at first, then spreading. Because bad headlines happen. Embarrassing stories happen. Presidents survive scandal all the time. The instinct becomes familiar, ancient even. Contain it, minimize it, and move on. A formula repeated over millennia. Inside rooms thick with cigarette smoke and nerves. Powerful men begin speaking a language conspirators always speak once things go wrong. Damage control. Keeping people quiet. We have to control the narrative. We have to protect the president and ourselves. Money gets discussed, silence discussed, what investigators should know, what investigators should never know. And that's when this story changes, because the burglary itself, that was small and clumsy. But conspiracies are rarely remembered for the original crime. They're remembered for what powerful people do afterward. So, the cover-up begins. Phone calls and meetings behind closed doors, cash moved quietly, pressure applied carefully, men convincing themselves that they're fixing a political problem instead of creating something catastrophic. And sitting at the center of the storm where he fully understands how dangerous it becomes yet or not, President Richard Nixon watches, paranoid. A man who already sees enemies everywhere. And now, one more enemy arrives. The truth. At first, the White House thinks time will solve this. Time solves scandals. Time buries headlines. News cycles move, and people get distracted. Wars happen. Elections happen. Life happens. And finally, people forget. A strange burglary in an office building? Embarrassing, sure. Fatal? Probably not. At least that's what the men are telling themselves in the room smelling of cigarette smoke, stale coffee, and wool suits. Imagine the late nights inside the West Wing. The phones ringing too often, the ashtrays filling up way too fast, voices lowered whenever the doors open. Men close to power speaking carefully around the thing nobody wants to say too plainly. How bad is this? And maybe more importantly, how do we stop it? Because conspirators always believe that they can still be managed right up until the moment that they can't. The conversation turns practical. The burglars need keeping quiet, and the story needs containing. The investigation just needs steering. The word feels safer than interference, safer than obstruction. Somewhere along the way, hush money enters the bloodstream of the scandal. Cash for silence, support for families, the encouragement to stay loyal, the sort of things people convince themselves is temporary, just some political housekeeping. And over all of it hangs one uncomfortable fact. Inside the White House, conversations are being recorded. That detail feels absurd now, almost unbelievable, but Nixon installed a taping system, a president quietly recording himself. Behind polished wood and presidential authority, machines hummed softly, indifferently, and patient. The voices were captured, jokes and arguments alike, strategy, frustrations, fear, all of it. No one in those rooms fully appreciating that history is quietly happening. Meanwhile, outside the White House, two reporters begin pulling threads. Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein sit inside newsrooms thick with smoke and deadlines, chasing something that refuses to stay small. While phones are ringing in the background and their sources are hesitant, the editors are pushing them harder. The late nights begin to blur together. The smell of ink and coffee settling into clothes while facts slowly begin linking themselves together. A burglar knows someone. Someone knows campaign money. Campaign money points toward re-election efforts. Names circle closer and closer to the White House, circling like water in a flush toilet closer and closer to the center. And somewhere in parking garages and shadowed meetings comes another figure, a source. A man history later remembers as Deep Throat. I really feel like he could have chosen a better code name than Tickled Tonsil, but whatever. Just imagine the mood. A parking garage after dark where every sound feels loud. A voice low enough to disappear into the structure. Fragments of confirmation, not answers, but directions. Follow the money. The phrase sticks out because conspiracies in modern government no longer hide beneath castle floors. They hide in bank transfers, committee names, paperwork, and plausible deniability. And slowly the shape of this starts to become visible. This is not five burglars improvising. This reaches upwards to the campaigns, to influence, and to the presidency itself. Inside the White House, nerves tighten. What begins as confidence becomes irritation. Irritation becomes worry. Worry turns to anger. Who's leaking? Who's talking? Can anyone still be trusted? Nixon grows more suspicious. The walls feel closer. The investigation refuses to die. And somewhere inside, tapes humming silently behind presidential walls, the truth waits. Pressure changes people, especially powerful people. Inside the White House, confidence begins curdling into something uglier. Suspicion. The meetings stretch later, tempers shorten, doors close harder than before. Cigarette smoke hangs thick enough to sting, while aides move carefully through hallways, learning instinctively when not to interrupt. Summer heat outside, air conditioning humming against the sealed windows, coffee sitting cold in forgotten cups. The president sitting behind the desk of the most powerful office on earth, increasingly asking the same question. Who is against me? Because by now, the scandal refuses to die. Congress, investigators, and reporters are circling around the administration, and the story keeps widening. Money trails, testimony, and quiet inconsistencies turning loud. The burglars that know people. Those people know campaign officials. Campaign officials know White House staff. Every answer seems to open another door, and then come the hearings. These were televised. America no longer reads scandal in newspapers alone. Now families sit in living rooms while television glows late into the night. Men in suits raising hands and swearing truth. Washington suddenly feels less distant. The conspiracy walks into people's homes, and then something slips. A sentence. Almost casual. The kind of detail that changes history. During testimony, Alex Butterfield reveals the existence of a taping system. For a second, the room struggles to understand what it's hearing. Tapes? Recorded conversations? Inside the White House? Imagine the silence after realization lands. Not confusion, but recognition. Because suddenly Watergate changes shape. Again. Before, the scandal is testimony versus denial. Rumor versus politics, and memory versus memory. But now, now there may be proof. Actual voices, actual conversations, history preserved in magnetic tape. Inside the White House, panic sharpens. Real panic. Because they know tape does not forget. Tape does not reinterpret, and tape won't politely soften memory years later. Tape just listens and documents. And somewhere in the room, smelling faintly of paper, smoke, sweat, and fear, powerful men begin understanding something terrible. If investigators hear those recordings, they may hear everything. The fights turn vicious. Subpoenas arrive demanding the tapes, and the White House resists. Executive privilege, they claim, with national security, they claim. Arguments pile high because surrendering recordings feels impossible. Imagine Richard Nixon pacing, suspicious of enemies both real and imagined. A man who spends decades clawing toward power, now feeling it narrowing around him. Every leak feels personal, every question hostile, every headline a betrayal. Then comes something almost too dramatic to sound real. The Saturday Night Massacre. In October of 1973, in the middle of the night, tension already thick enough for bread, Nixon orders the firing of special prosecutor demanding the tapes, but people refuse. Elliot Richardson resigns rather than obey, then William Ruckelshaus refuses, and he resigns too. Imagine Washington that night, phones ringing endlessly, newsrooms exploding with noise, typewriters just hammering away, televisions interrupting regularly scheduled programming, officials staring at one another, wondering if the presidency is beginning to fracture in public. Then, finally, someone obeys. Robert Bork dismisses the prosecutor, and for the moment, America feels something dangerous. Constitutional unease. Not just a scandal anymore, a full-blown crisis. Because now the question changes. No longer is it, did something illegal happen? Now it's, what happens when the president fights the investigation itself? And somewhere inside sealed systems, quietly waiting, the tapes still exist, holding conversations no one outside those walls has heard yet. But sooner or later, someone is going to press play. The country feels exhausted. And that's part of the strangest end of it, is Watergate stops feeling like one scandal and starts feeling more like weather, always hanging overhead. People argue about it at dinner tables, in diners, at office coffee machines, late at night beside glowing televisions, where anchors speak with the kind of careful seriousness that makes ordinary people uneasy. And somewhere inside all of it sits a question growing heavier and heavier every day. What is on those tapes? Because by now everyone understands something. The recordings matter. Maybe not every conversation, maybe not every detail. But somewhere inside hours of presidential speech sits truth. Or at least enough truth to frighten powerful men. Sounds like some files we've been waiting on. And the legal fight tightens, and the courts move and arguments pile up. Executive privileges versus investigation, presidential authority versus accountability. The White House pushes back, hard. Imagine Nixon during these months, angrier and more isolated than ever. Phone calls, meetings, briefings, the constant pressure of cameras waiting outside. The feeling, perhaps, that enemies pass inwardly from every direction. A man who builds political life around resilience suddenly watches trust evaporate in real time. Then, another crack. This one, almost absurd. The 18.5-minute gap. One tape. Missing audio. Just gone. Accident. Explanation, confusion, none of it satisfying. Imagine investigators hearing silence where history should be speaking. The absence itself is suddenly suspicious. Eventually, even missing information feels like evidence. But still, enough survives. And the fight climbs higher. Higher than Congress. Higher than committees. Toward the highest court in the country. The case becomes simple in wording. Enormous in meaning. Must the president hand over the tapes? Imagine the atmosphere in Washington. Hot summer air. Reporters crowding courthouse steps. Notebook pages filling fast. Lawyers speaking a language that sounds clinical while everybody else understands. The stakes are enormous. Then the decision arrives. Unanimous. The president must comply. Not a suggestion, not negotiation. An order. The tapes go over. And somewhere in recorded conversations, buried among hours of mundane presidential life, investigators find something devastating. A conversation later remembered by another name. The smoking gun. Imagine a room where someone first listens. The tape spins softly, the mechanical hum of the playback. Voices from years earlier suddenly alive again. Nixon speaking. Haldeman nearby. Discussion not of innocence, but containment. Conversation of using the CIA to slow the FBI investigation, managing the fallout, and the cover-up breathing in real time. Just like that, the air leaves the room, because this changes everything. Before, defenders argue uncertainty, misunderstanding, distance. Maybe Nixon doesn't know. Maybe subordinates act alone. Now the presidency itself sounds entangled. No speculation here. No anonymous source in a parking garage. The president's own voice. Imagine Washington hearing it. Silence first. Then movement. A quiet movement. Because his support begins collapsing. The kind of collapse conspirators always fear the most. Not attack, abandonment. Because power survives scandal surprisingly well, but it rarely survives isolation. Men who defended Nixon yesterday suddenly speak differently today. Carefully. Distance creeping into language. Conversations shift toward impeachment, not as possibility, but probability. And somewhere inside the White House, surrounded by portraits, papers, telephones, and silence growing louder, Richard Nixon begins understanding something terrible. The conspiracy does not fail because enemies defeat it. It fails because truth finally catches up. The White House feels quieter now, but not peaceful, heavy. The kind of quiet that settles after people stop pretending. The staff move through the hallways, phones still ring, and secretaries continue to carry folders from room to room beneath the fluorescent lights. But something has changed. Hope leaves first. Imagine walking those corridors in the summer of 1974. Air conditioning humming against thick August heat outside, the smell of coffee, copy paper, cigarette smoke, and polished wood. Aides speaking softer than usual, and doors closing gently as though loud sounds might somehow make reality worse. Because by now, the math becomes impossible. Congress moves toward impeachment, and this is not a rumor. This is no political theater anymore. Articles of impeachment are beginning to take shape. Obstruction of justice, abuse of power, contempt of Congress, and perhaps most dangerous of all, support inside Nixon's own party begins dissolving. You can almost feel it. Political allies arriving with careful faces, conversations too polite, too rehearsed. The kind people have when bad news already settles in. Republican leaders come to the White House. Barry Goldwater, Hugh Scott, John Rhodes. Men not there to comfort. They're not there to strategize victory. Imagine the room, the wood-paneled walls, the president seated across from men who know history is changing. Nobody's raising voices. Nobody needs to. Sometimes, the calm hurts worse. The message lands plainly. The votes are gone. If impeachment reaches the Senate, conviction becomes likely. Even allies will not save him. For a long moment, maybe Nixon simply sits with that. Years of ambition, all narrowing toward one impossible realization. There is no way through this. Not anymore. Because conspiracies always believe there's one more move. One more conversation, one more strategy, one more person who stays loyal, until suddenly, there isn't. On August 8th, 1974, the television cameras hummed softly. American families gathered in living rooms, kitchen lights glowing dimly behind them. Parents paused conversations, children half understanding the seriousness without fully knowing why. And Richard Nixon appears. The presidency suddenly looking heavier than power is supposed to look. Imagine the stillness. No cheering, no applause, just expectation. Then the words arrive. He resigns. Not tomorrow's rumor, not political speculation. Absolute reality. The first American president to step down from office. Outside, Washington holds its breath. Inside, homes across the country, silence follows. Because no matter politics, people understand history when it enters the room. The next morning, Marine One waits on the south lawn. Rotator blades churn humid air. Staff gathered with faces unreadable, some loyal, some exhausted. And Nixon walks out beside his family, pauses, turns, raises both arms in that familiar awkward gesture, half defiance, half farewell, and then he boards the helicopter lifts, the White House shrinking beneath him, and just like that, Watergate ends. Or rather, the conspiracy ends. The consequences had only just begun. Because Watergate changed something profound. For thousands of years, conspiracy means secret plots against rulers, daggers, poison, barrels beneath Parliament. But here, the conspiracy comes from inside the government itself. The call is coming from in the house. Not killing a leader, but protecting one. A network of surveillance, secrecy, break-ins, hush money, manipulation, and obstruction, built around political survival. There was no king murdered here, no emperor stabbed, just institutions quietly bending around fear and power. And afterward, Americans trust a little less. Because once a conspiracy inside the highest office proves real, people begin wondering what other things powerful people might be hiding. And that question, whether deserved or not, never fully leaves.